Chaos erupted across the Caltharian fleet. Admiral Kethavar watched his bridge officers scramble between communication stations as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The humans had done something that no conquered species had ever attempted before. They had used Caltharian law against the Caltharians themselves. "Admiral," called Communications Officer Zalthan, "we are receiving emergency transmissions from the High Council on Calthar Prime. They demand an immediate explanation of the legal situation." Kethavar rubbed his temples with two of his four hands. He had served under Vextar for 20 years, but he had never seen his commander make such a catastrophic error. The Universal Absorption Protocols were ancient law, drilled into every Caltharian officer from childhood. How had Vextar forgotten something so basic? "What is the status of our legal team?" Kethavar asked. "They have been working for 6 hours," replied legal advisor Mordex. "The situation is complicated. The humans are technically correct. The conquest protocols were not followed properly." "Can we simply ignore the protocols?" asked Tactical Officer Beltar. "Declare that might makes right?" Mordex's expression grew grim. "Absolutely not. Our entire empire is built on legal precedent. We rule over 200 worlds because those species accepted the validity of our conquest procedures. If we abandon our own laws now, every conquered world will declare independence within a week." On the bridge's main screen, a communication request appeared from the Caltharian homeworld. Admiral Kethavar accepted it, and the hologram of High Counselor Rekshan materialized before them. "Admiral," the ancient Caltharian's voice was filled with barely controlled fury, "explain to me how a primitive species has managed to trap our entire empire in a legal nightmare." "High Counselor," Kethavar began carefully, "Commander Vextar declared victory before completing the required cultural protocols. The humans studied our laws and used this oversight against us. I am aware of what happened," Rekshan snapped. "The question is what we do about it. Half the conquered worlds in our empire are already demanding legal reviews of their own subjugations. The Zephyrian Confederacy is mobilizing their fleets thinking we appear weak. This disaster grows worse by the hour. On Earth, Professor Dalsu worked frantically in the University Law Library, which had somehow survived the alien bombardment. Junho had asked him to research every detail of the trial of worthiness, and what he found was both encouraging and terrifying. "The trial is not a battle," Dalsu explained to the emergency council that President So Young had assembled. "It is a demonstration of unique cultural and technological value. The conquered species must prove they can contribute something important to galactic civilization." "What kind of contributions?" asked Science Minister Boram. "The records are vague," Dalsu admitted. "Each trial has been different. The Velkari proved their worth through advanced mathematics. The Thorian Empire demonstrated unique artistic capabilities. The Zephyrians showed military innovations that impressed even the Caltharians." President So Young looked around the room at her advisors. "What can humanity offer that the galaxy has never seen before?" "Our technology is centuries behind theirs," pointed out Technology Minister Yunsu. "Our military was just destroyed," added Defense Minister Minho. "But our culture," said Cultural Minister Chan Wu thoughtfully, "our culture is uniquely diverse. We have thousands of languages, millions of art forms, countless ways of thinking about the universe." Junho nodded enthusiastically. "That could be exactly what we need. The Caltharians value order and unity. Most galactic civilizations are monocultures, but humanity is chaotic, diverse, unpredictable. That might be our strength." Meanwhile, in a secure communications room, Captain Dongsu received a message that changed everything. The resistance movement had been monitoring alien communications, and they had discovered something incredible. "President So Young," Dongsu reported urgently, "we have intercepted Caltharian military communications. They are not just worried about Earth. They are facing a major threat from something called the Zephyrian Confederacy." "Who are the Zephyrians?" asked Foreign Minister Ye Jin. "Another galactic empire," explained Junho. "The Caltharians' biggest rival. They have been at war on and off for centuries." Dongsu activated a holographic display showing the intercepted alien communications. "According to these messages, the Zephyrians are planning a major offensive. They think the legal crisis with Earth makes the Caltharians look weak. This could be the perfect time to attack." President So Young studied the intelligence data. "What does this mean for our trial?" "It means the Caltharians are desperate," Junho realized. They need to resolve the Earth situation quickly before it encourages more enemies. But they also cannot simply ignore their own laws. So we have leverage, So Young concluded. Back on the Caltharian flagship, High Commander Vextar faced the most humiliating moment of his career. He knelt before a holographic projection of the High Council, while hundreds of legal advisors and military officers watched from around the galaxy. Commander Vextar, announced High Counselor Rekshan, you have brought shame upon the Caltharian Empire. Your oversight has created a legal crisis that threatens our entire civilization. I accept full responsibility, Vextar replied stiffly, but the situation can still be managed. We can conduct the trial of worthiness and demonstrate that the humans have nothing valuable to offer. Then we complete the conquest legally. And if they prove their worth? Asked Counselor Bexnell. Then we grant them independence and alliance status, Vextar said reluctantly. It would be unprecedented but legal. The High Council deliberated for hours while the galaxy watched. Finally, Rekshan announced their decision. The trial will proceed, he declared. But Commander Vextar, you will not oversee it. Admiral Kethvar will take command of the Earth operation. You are recalled to Calthar Prime for disciplinary action. Vextar's shame was complete, but he accepted the judgment without protest. As he prepared to leave for the homeworld, he looked down at Earth one last time. The humans had outsmarted him completely, using his own pride and assumptions against him. On Earth, Junho received official notification that the trial of worthiness had been approved. Humanity would have one chance to prove they deserved independence. If they failed, they would become part of the Caltharian Empire forever. But if they succeeded, they would join the galactic community as equals. No human world had ever achieved such a thing. The stakes could not be higher. How long do we have to prepare? Asked President So Young. According to Caltharian law, Junho replied, 72 hours. 3 days to save our species. Around the room, the leaders of humanity began planning the most important presentation in human history. They would need to show the galaxy something it had never seen before, something uniquely human, something worth preserving. The young diplomat who had started this impossible journey looked out the window at the alien ships still hovering over Earth. Soon, those ships would either leave as allies or complete their conquest. Everything depended on humanity's ability to prove that diversity, chaos, and stubborn cleverness were as valuable as strength and order. The trial would determine not just Earth's fate, but the future of human civilization among the stars. The Great Hall of the United Nations building had never seen anything like this. High Commander Vextar stood at the center of the room, his 12-foot frame towering over the assembled humans. His blue crystal armor caught the light and threw it back in dazzling patterns. Behind him stood 6 other Caltharian officers, each one deadly and magnificent. Cameras from around the world recorded everything. This ceremony was being broadcast to every corner of the galaxy, showing the mighty Caltharian Empire accepting the surrender of another species. Vextar wanted everyone to see human submission. President So Young knelt before the alien commander, along with the leaders of every major nation on Earth. The sight should have filled Junho with despair, but instead he felt calm. Everything was going exactly according to plan. People of Earth, Vextar's translated voice boomed through the hall. Today you join the Caltharian Empire. Your independence ends. Your resistance ends. You will serve the greater good of our civilization. So Young raised her head to speak. Junho had coached her carefully on the exact words to use. Mighty Commander Vextar, she said in perfect Caltharian. Humanity acknowledges the superiority of the Caltharian Empire. We submit to your wisdom and your power. We understand that resistance is futile against your greatness. The alien commander seemed pleased by her use of his language. Few conquered species bothered to learn Caltharian before their defeat. It showed proper respect. Your acknowledgement is acceptable, Vextar replied. Now present your cultural gift of submission, as is proper under our laws. This was the moment Junho had been waiting for. The alien commander had just admitted in front of the entire galaxy that a cultural gift was required under Caltharian law. The trap was beginning to close. Junho stepped forward, carrying the sculpture that Yejin had created. The metal tree gleamed in the lights, its branches reaching upward in a gesture that could be interpreted as supplication or defiance, depending on who was looking. Honored Commander, Junho said in ancient Caltharian, using the most formal dialect he knew. Humanity presents this gift in accordance with Rule 2 of the Universal Absorption Protocols. May it symbolize our place in your great empire. The words hit Vextar like a physical blow. The alien commander's forearms suddenly went rigid. Several of his officers stepped forward in alarm. In the broadcast booth, alien technicians began talking rapidly into their communication devices. "You know of the Universal Absorption Protocols?" Vextar asked, his voice no longer calm and confident. "We have studied Caltharian law with great care," Junho replied smoothly. "We understand that great empires must follow great traditions. The protocols ensure that conquests are legally valid and culturally complete." Vextar accepted the sculpture with one of his massive hands. But Junho could see uncertainty in the alien's movements. Something was wrong and the commander knew it. "The gift is acceptable," Vextar said slowly. "The ceremony is complete. Earth is now part of the Caltharian Empire." "Actually," Junho said politely, "I believe there may be a small legal issue to address." Every eye in the room turned to the young human diplomat. President So Young held her breath. This was the moment of truth. "You have just acknowledged that Rule 2 of the Universal Absorption Protocols requires a cultural gift ceremony," Junho continued in perfect Caltharian. "However, you declared victory over Earth before requesting this ceremony. According to subsection 47C of the protocols, this makes your conquest legally invalid." The silence in the room was absolute. Even the cameras seemed to stop humming. Vextar stared down at Junho with an expression that could have melted. "Steele, explain," the alien commander said in a voice like breaking ice. Junho activated a holographic display that showed the relevant sections of Caltharian law. "The Universal Absorption Protocols clearly state that all requirements must be fulfilled before victory can be declared. You announced Earth's conquest 3 hours ago and began broadcasting it across the galaxy. But you only requested the cultural ceremony 30 minutes ago. Under your own laws, this invalidates the conquest." Vextar's officers were now talking frantically into their communication devices. In the alien fleet above Earth, legal advisors were being awakened from sleep and dragged to emergency meetings. The commander's oversight was becoming a galactic incident. "This is a minor technicality," Vextar said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "With respect, Commander," Junho replied, "there are no minor technicalities in Caltharian law. Your empire controls over 200 conquered worlds. Every one of those conquests followed the exact same protocols. If those protocols can be ignored with Earth, then every conquered species in your empire could claim their subjugation was also invalid." The implications hit Vextar like an avalanche. If Earth successfully challenged the legality of its conquest, it would set a precedent that could destroy the entire Caltharian Empire. Rebellions would break out on every conquered world. The legal foundation of their civilization would crumble. "You planned this," Vextar accused. "We studied your laws and followed them exactly," Junho said with a slight smile. "We requested the ceremony that your protocols require. You agreed to it. By accepting our cultural gift, you have acknowledged that the ceremony was necessary. But since you declared victory before the ceremony, your conquest lacks legal validity." In the broadcast booth, alien technicians were receiving urgent orders from the Caltharian homeworld. The galactic broadcast was showing the mighty empire being outsmarted by a species they had considered primitive. It was a public relations disaster of unprecedented proportions. Vextar looked around the room, his forearms trembling with rage and frustration. He could destroy every human in the building with a thought. His ships could turn Earth into a burning wasteland in minutes, but he could not ignore his own laws without destroying everything the Caltharian Empire stood for. "What do you want?" Vextar finally asked. "According to Section 15 of the Universal Absorption Protocols," Junho said calmly, "when a conquest is legally challenged, the conquered species has the right to a trial of worthiness. We can prove that humanity deserves independence by demonstrating our unique value to the galactic community." "And if you fail this trial?" Vextar asked. "Then we accept Caltharian rule without further legal challenges," Junho replied. "But if we succeed, Earth gains full independence and the right to join the galactic community as equals." Vextar was trapped, and everyone in the room knew it. He could not refuse the trial without admitting that Caltharian law was meaningless, but he also could not guarantee victory, because humans had already proven they were dangerously clever. The alien commander stood silent for a long moment, processing the disaster that his pride had created. Finally, he spoke. "The Caltharian High Council will review your legal challenge," he said stiffly. "Until they reach a decision, Earth remains under military occupation but not formal conquest." As Vextar and his officers left the ceremony hall, President So-Young turned to Junho with amazement in her eyes. "Did we just win?" she asked quietly. "We bought time," Junho replied. "Now we have to prove that humanity is worth saving." Junho had not slept for 18 hours. Empty coffee cups covered his desk as he worked through ancient Caltharian legal documents. The alien writing looked like twisted metal, but he was starting to understand the patterns. Each symbol told him more about how the Caltharian Empire really worked. "Found anything useful?" asked Heejin as she entered the archive room. The xenolinguist carried her own stack of papers and looked just as tired as Junho felt. "More than I hoped for," Junho replied, pointing at his screen. "Look at this. The Universal Absorption Protocols were created 847 years ago when the Caltharians conquered the Mordak Empire." Heejin sat down next to him and read the translated text. "It says here that the Mordak had a very complex culture. The Caltharians were worried about rebellions, so they created these protocols to make sure conquered species felt properly integrated." "Exactly," Junho said excitedly. "But look at Rule 2. He pointed to a specific section of the document. "All conquered species must formally acknowledge Caltharian superiority in their native tongue and provide a cultural gift of submission." Hyejin read the section twice. "They never asked us for a cultural gift. They never even mentioned it," Junho confirmed. "They have been so focused on showing their military power that they forgot their own bureaucracy." The two humans worked together, translating more documents. The Caltharian legal system was incredibly complex, with thousands of rules and subrules. But the Universal Absorption Protocols were clear. Without completing all the required steps, a conquest was not legally valid. "This is strange," Heejin said, reading another document. "It says that if the protocols are not followed correctly, the conquered species can challenge the validity of their subjugation." "Challenge how?" Junho asked. "Through something called a trial of worthiness," Heejin read slowly. "The conquered species can prove they deserve independence by demonstrating unique value to the galactic community." Junho leaned back in his chair. This was better than he had hoped. Not only had the Caltharians made a legal mistake, but there was actually a way for Earth to win its freedom back. His phone buzzed. It was a message from President So-Young. "Report to the main briefing room immediately." When Junho and Hyejin arrived, they found the room full of people. President So-Young was there, along with all her ministers. But there were also new faces: scientists, historians, artists, and cultural experts. "Junho," said the president, "explain to everyone what you have discovered." Junho cleared his throat nervously. These were some of the most important people on Earth, and they were all looking at him. "The Caltharians have made a legal error," he began. "According to their own laws, they cannot complete the conquest of Earth until we perform certain ceremonies." He explained about the Universal Absorption Protocols, Rule 2, and the requirement for cultural gifts. As he spoke, he watched the faces around the table change from despair to curiosity to something that might have been hope. "So you are saying they cannot legally conquer us until we give them a present?" asked Cultural Minister Dalsu. "Not just any present," Hyejin added. "A cultural gift that acknowledges their superiority, and it has to be presented in a formal ceremony." "But they have already declared victory," pointed out Defense Minister Minho. "They are broadcasting it across the galaxy." "That is the problem," Junho said with a smile. "They declared victory before completing the legal requirements. Under Caltharian law, this makes their conquest invalid." President So-Young studied the young diplomat. "What exactly are you proposing?" "We contact High Commander Vextar and request a formal surrender ceremony," Junho said. "We tell him we want to follow proper Caltharian protocols and present our cultural gift of submission." "And then what?" asked General Chanwu. "Then we spring the trap," Junho replied. "Once he accepts our request for the ceremony, he is admitting that the ceremony was required. But since he declared victory before the ceremony, his conquest is legally invalid under his own laws." The room was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Foreign Minister Hyejin spoke up. "This is incredibly risky. What if he just refuses to care about the legal technicalities?"
He cannot, Yejin said.
The Caltharian Empire controls over 200 conquered worlds. If they ignore their own laws with Earth, every other conquered species could claim their subjugation was also invalid. The Empire would collapse. Art director Yoon-soo raised her hand. What kind of cultural gift would we need to prepare? Something that appears to acknowledge their superiority, Junho said, but also serves our purposes. I have some ideas about that. President So-young looked around the room. How much time do we have left? Minister Minho checked his watch. 14 hours until their deadline. Not much time to prepare a ceremony that could save our entire species, President So-young said grimly. But it is the only plan that does not end with billions of dead humans. Junho, what do you need? Access to our best cultural experts, Junho said, looking at the people around the table. And a way to record everything that happens during the ceremony. We will need proof of what the Caltharians say and do. Done, the president said. What else? A backup plan, said Captain Dong-soo from the back of the room. Junho was surprised to see him. He thought the captain had died with his ship. If this legal trap fails, we need to be ready for a final fight. How did you survive the destruction of the Phoenix? Asked General Chan-woo. Escape pod, Dong-soo replied grimly. I watched my ship die, but I made it to a rescue shuttle. Now I want revenge, but I also want our people to live. If the diplomat's plan works, great. If not, the resistance is ready. President So-young nodded. Junho handles the legal approach. Captain Dong-soo prepares the military backup. Everyone else supports whichever plan we need. As the meeting broke up, Junho felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. In 14 hours, he would either save humanity or watch it burn. But for the first time since the alien ships arrived, he believed they had a real chance. The Caltharians thought they had already won. Their arrogance would be their downfall. 8 hours remained until the alien deadline. President So-young sat in the communications center, preparing to make the most important phone call in human history. Junho stood beside her, reviewing his notes one final time. Remember, he whispered, you must sound humble but not desperate, respectful but not afraid. The Caltharians respect strength even in defeat. So-young nodded and activated the communication array. The signal traveled up to the massive alien flagship hovering above Earth. Within moments, the hologram of High Commander Vextar appeared before them. Human leader. The alien's translated voice was cold and mechanical. You have 8 hours to surrender unconditionally. Why do you waste time with communication? Honored Commander, So-young began, using the formal address that Junho had taught her. Humanity wishes to surrender according to proper Caltharian protocols. We request a formal ceremony to present our cultural gift of submission. Vextar's forearms moved in what Junho recognized as surprise. The alien had clearly not expected this response. You know of our protocols? Vextar asked. We have studied Caltharian law and culture, So-young replied smoothly. We understand that great empires have great traditions. Humanity wishes to honor those traditions in our surrender. There was a long pause. Junho held his breath, watching the alien commander think. This was the critical moment. If Vextar refused the ceremony, the plan would fail before it even started. Very well, Vextar finally said. Your respect for Caltharian tradition is acceptable. The ceremony will take place in 6 hours at your primary governmental location. Prepare your cultural gift well, humans. It will be the last independent act of your species. The communication ended. So-young slumped in her chair, suddenly looking very tired. He agreed, she said quietly. Now we need to prepare a gift that will save our world. In another part of the bunker, cultural historian Min Ho worked frantically with artist Ye Jin. They had been given an impossible task. Create something that looked like a submission gift but was actually a trap for the most powerful empire in the galaxy. What do humans value most? Minho asked as he sketched ideas on paper. Freedom, Ye Jin replied immediately. The right to choose our own path. Then that is what we give them, Minho said. A symbol of human freedom that they will think represents our surrender. They worked together, designing a sculpture that would look impressive to alien eyes. It was shaped like a tree, with metal branches reaching toward the sky. To the Caltharians, it would appear to show humanity reaching up to their superior civilization. But to humans, it represented something else entirely. The branches point upward, Yejin explained as she welded the pieces together, never bowing down, never giving up. Even in surrender, we reach for the stars. Hidden inside the base of the sculpture was a recording device that would capture everything said during the ceremony. This was crucial for Junho's plan to work. Meanwhile, Captain Dongsu met with resistance leaders in the lower levels of the bunker. These were the survivors of Earth's military forces, along with civilian volunteers who refused to accept defeat. If the diplomats' plan fails, Dongsu told them, we make our last stand. Not because we can win, but because humans never go quietly into the dark. A young soldier named Bo Ram raised her hand. Captain, what are our chances if we have to fight? Dongsu looked around the room at the determined faces. Honestly, almost zero. Their weapons are too advanced, their ships too strong. But sometimes the chance of victory is less important than the act of resistance itself. The group spent the remaining hours preparing weapons and planning sabotage attacks. They knew they would probably die, but they also knew that future generations would remember their courage. Back in the main bunker, Junho made final preparations with Hye-jin. They reviewed every detail of Caltharian law, making sure they understood exactly how to spring their trap. Are you certain this will work? Hye-jin asked. Nothing is certain, Junho admitted, but the Caltharians have built their entire empire on legal precedent. They cannot simply ignore their own laws without destroying the foundation of their power. And if Vextar decides to ignore the law anyway? Junho was quiet for a moment. Then Captain Dongsu and his people will make sure the galaxy remembers that humanity fought to the end. As the time for the ceremony approached, teams of humans worked to prepare the location. They chose the Great Hall of the United Nations building in Geneva, which had survived the alien bombardment. The room was large enough to accommodate Vextar's massive form and impressive enough to satisfy Caltharian pride. President So Young changed into formal dress, while Junho put on his best diplomatic uniform. They would need to look impressive for the galaxy-wide broadcast that Vextar had announced. Nervous? So Young asked as they walked toward the ceremony hall. Terrified, Junho admitted, but also excited. We are about to attempt something that no conquered species has ever tried before. Using the enemy's own laws against them, So Young mused. It is very human, actually. When we cannot win through strength, we win through cleverness. The ceremony hall was filled with cameras and recording equipment. Representatives from Earth's major nations sat in formal rows, all wearing their finest clothes. At the front of the room stood the sculpture that Hye-jin had created, gleaming under the lights. Outside, alien shuttles descended from the massive ships. High Commander Vextar was coming to accept humanity's surrender and witness what he thought would be the final submission of the human race. None of the aliens suspected that they were walking into a trap 800 years in the making, a trap built not from weapons or technology, but from their own pride and their own laws. Junho checked his watch. In 30 minutes, the ceremony would begin. In 30 minutes, humanity would discover whether cleverness could triumph over overwhelming force. The young diplomat took a deep breath and prepared to make history. The sky above Seoul burned red as massive alien ships blocked out the sun. Admiral Taemin stood on the observation deck of Luna Base, watching the last human destroyer explode in a ball of orange fire. 3 years of war had come to this moment. Earth's proud fleet was nothing but floating metal and dead dreams. Sir, that was the Phoenix, reported Lieutenant Hye-jin, her voice shaking. All hands lost, Taemin closed his eyes. The Phoenix had been his first command 20 years ago. Now Captain Dongsu and his crew were gone, just like thousands of other brave souls who had fought against impossible odds. The Caltharian Empire had technology that humans could barely understand. Their ships moved faster than light, their weapons turned mountains to glass, and their shields laughed at human missiles. On Earth, President So Young sat in the emergency bunker beneath the Blue House. The walls shook as alien bombardment hit the surface. Her advisors talked in worried whispers, but she could barely hear them. All she could think about was the children in the shelters, waiting to see if they would live through the night. Madam President, said Defense Minister Min-ho, we have received another message from the aliens. The hologram flickered to life, showing a creature that stood 12 feet tall. Its body was covered in blue crystal armor that seemed to glow from within. Forearms moved with deadly grace, and its face had no mouth that humans could see. This was High Commander Vextar of the Caltharian Empire. When it spoke, the words came through a translator device. Humans of Earth, The voice was cold like winter wind. Your pathetic resistance ends now. You have 24 hours to surrender completely. Lay down all weapons. Open all your cities. Submit to Caltharian rule or we will burn your world to ash. The message ended, leaving the room in silence. So Young looked around at her advisors. These were the smartest people on Earth, and they all had the same look of defeat. Earth's armies were broken. The space fleet was gone. Even the secret weapons had failed. What are our options? So Young asked, though she already knew the answer. We can fight to the end, said General Chan Wu. Make them pay for every city. And watch billions die, replied Foreign Minister Ye Jin. The aliens have shown they can destroy entire cities in minutes. We cannot protect our people from their weapons. In the corner of the room, a young man quietly worked at a computer terminal. Junho was just a diplomatic aide, barely 30 years old. While the important people talked about surrender, he studied the alien messages. Something about the Caltharian demands felt wrong to him. Junho had spent 5 years learning alien languages at the Diplomatic Academy. He knew how the major galactic empires worked. The Caltharians were known for being very careful about rules and laws. They had conquered over 200 worlds, but they always followed the same pattern. The surrender terms, Junho said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He was nervous speaking in front of the president, but he had noticed something important. What about them? Asked So Young. They are incomplete, Junho said carefully. When the Caltharians conquered the Mordak Empire 800 years ago, they required specific ceremonies. Cultural exchanges, formal acknowledgments in the native language, but these demands, he pointed at the hologram projector, they only talk about military surrender. Minister Ye Jin frowned. What difference does that make? They have the bigger guns. The Caltharians care about law more than anything else, Junho explained. Their whole empire is built on legal precedent. If they make a mistake in the conquest process, it could cause problems with other conquered species. President So Young studied the young aide. What exactly are you thinking? I need to check the diplomatic archives, Junho said. The full records of Caltharian conquests. There might be something they have forgotten. Outside, another explosion shook the bunker. Time was running out, but So Young nodded. Do it. Check everything. Junho ran through the corridors to the archive section. The computers here contained every piece of information Earth had gathered about alien civilizations. Most of it came from intercepted communications and stolen data, but it was complete. He called up the files on Caltharian conquest procedures. Page after page of legal text filled his screen. The aliens had very specific rules about how they absorbed new species into their empire. Every step had to be followed exactly, or the conquest was not legally valid. His heart started beating faster as he read. The Caltharians always required the same things: military defeat, formal surrender, cultural submission, and acknowledgement of Caltharian superiority in the native language of the conquered species. They called these the Universal Absorption Protocols, but in their message to Earth they had only demanded military surrender. They had forgotten about the cultural requirements. In their rush to declare victory, they had skipped important steps. Junho's hands shook as he copied the relevant laws to his personal device. This could be exactly what humanity needed. Not a weapon to destroy the aliens, but their own rules to trap them. He ran back to the main room where the president was still meeting with her advisors. Madam President, he called out, breathing hard, I found something. So Young looked up. What is it? The Caltharians have made a legal mistake, Junho said. According to their own laws, they cannot complete the conquest of Earth until we perform certain ceremonies. Cultural exchanges, formal acknowledgments. They forgot to request these things. And that matters because, asked General Chan Wu. Because their entire empire is based on legal precedent, Junho replied. If they violate their own conquest protocols with Earth, every other conquered species could claim their own subjugation was invalid. The whole empire could fall apart. President So Young stood up slowly. For the first time in hours, she saw a spark of hope. What do you need? Time to research their exact requirements, Junho said. And permission to contact their commander about arranging a proper surrender ceremony. You want to ask for a ceremony? Minister Minho looked confused. Yes, Junho smiled for the first time in days. We are going to give them exactly what their laws require. And in doing so, we might just save humanity. Above them, The alien ships continued their bombardment, not knowing that a young human diplomat was about to turn their greatest strength into their greatest weakness.